Looking at past exam results is quite interesting because it identifies trends and important stuff that you can really narrow your revision to. So I think the first thing to realise is that there's a big difference between the way your SACs are graded and the way the exam's graded. So depending on your school, your SAC grades will be marked absolutely, and basically what that means is you're marked independently of how other students go. You either get the question right or you get it wrong. It doesn't really matter what the other student got. Then what you're given is a final grade based on your percentage. So at our school, the scales are as follows. If you got 14%, you got an E, 24% got you a D, 34% got you a D+, all the way up to 92% would get you an A+. Well, the exam's a little bit different. It's marked relatively, and what that means is what did you first of all get out of 200 marks, and then compare that to everybody else. First of all, the exam's only 100 marks, so why would they be marking you out of 200 marks? Well, that's because every exam is marked twice, once by 2 people, and therefore your total is out of 200. What will then happen is VCAA will allocate you on what's called a normal distribution, and you'll fit somewhere on there. So the average or mean will be in the middle here, and then you'll either be on it, you'll be above it, or below it, and it'll be to a different extent. If you're 1 standard deviation above the mean, then you'll be in the top, or 34% above the average. If you're 3 standard deviations above, you're going to be the very, very upper echelon of students. So the actual exam grade average is a little bit different. So if you take, the SAC average at your school, it's probably a lot higher than this on each SAC. But if you look at the exam, remember everything's comes down to 2 hours on one day for the whole year. So the average is never very good. So you can see in Unit 3 2012 it was 52%. It was 53% in Unit 4. And since we've moved to end of year exams in 2013, you can see the average has been very low. So the average performance in 2014 was only 42%. And that's because the exam's more difficult and because it's now just one big exam instead of 2 smaller exams. Looking at the normal distribution, what does all this mean? It basically means that, first of all, whatever the average is, that gets put in the middle. So for example, in 2012, Unit 3, the average was 52. In Unit 4, it was 53. In 2013, it was 46. And in 2014, it was 42. And then you'll fit somewhere on that graph depending on how you got, what you got compared to 42. And what that means is you're then sort of allocated grades based on how you went. So the bottom 2% of students got a UG, the bottom next 3% of kids got an E, 5% of kids got an E+, and so on. And then at the other end, 12% of kids got a B+, 11% of kids got an A, and 9% of kids get an A+. And that's pretty consistent every year. So you can see it doesn't quite look like it, but basically it's designed to sort of look, if you look at it as a sort of a trend or a graph here, it's sort of like a normal distribution. So basically the kids here, 9% will get an A+, no more. It doesn't matter if the results are really high or really low one year, still 9% will get A+. So what does that mean? It means, well, what does it take to get an A+ changes every year. So if you look at past exams, you can see to get an A+ in 2010, you needed 89%, which is almost what it is to get an A+ on SACs. But if you look in 2014, that's come down quite a bit. And there's a couple of reasons. One, we only have 1 exam instead of 2. And secondly, the course is more difficult now. There's more difficult theory in particular, and that sort of brings down the average. So what that means is if you look at 2014, for example, 9% of kids got above 79%. So if you could have got 79% and you would have been an A+. Then in 2014, if you got 68%, you got an A, and less than 79. If you got 57%, you got a B+. And looking at this, you can see the average was 42. So if you were above average and got somewhere between 45 and 56, you ended up getting a B, which is a very, very solid grade, but it's a very, very low average to do that. And it's all because the exam's marked relatively. It's how do you do compared to everybody else. If you get 45%, you might be disappointed with that on a SAC, but it would actually mean you were above average in terms of the whole state. And you can see that middle grade here of the B has come down significantly in the last few years. At the bottom end, you can see there's marks available all the way up to 4%. And all the way down to 2%. If you get 2%, it's not an ungraded, it's an E.